Welcome to From the Ashes, the Dungeon Crawler Network podcast all about Ashes of Creation by Intrepid Studios. Bear witness to the rebirth of the MMORPG genre from the ashes of an industry that has left the gamers behind. I am your host, Aggelos, and I am joined by my co-host over here, Stormzlord. How are you?
I'm doing great tonight.
Excellent. And of course, the one, the only Alpha Soul himself.
Doing fantastic. Great to be here.
Excellent. Is your arm tired from the Mario Tennis?
Yeah, it's doing okay. Got some good Mario Tennis back there.
Nice. Well, we've got a fun show planned for you guys tonight. As I'm sure you can see by the episode title, we are going to do a little bit of theorizing about the hybrid combat system that Ashes of Creation is going to be doing. Now, as of the date of this recording and as of the date of this go live, the next Intrepid Studios live stream is a couple days away. I think it's either Thursday. Does anyone remember, is it a Thursday or a Friday?
Usually it's a Friday.
Normally it's a Friday, yeah. So this episode will come out on Monday. For those of you who are not part of our Patreon program, our Twitch subscriber, which we'll get to in a second. That would have been a great little segue into it, but I'm not done talking. But yeah, that'll come out on Friday. So we're going to do a little bit of theory crafting on the type of combat systems that we've seen in other MMOs. Not really full action because we know Ashes is not the case, but we're going to talk about a few of the other games and other systems that we think we would like to see, or we hope that Ashes of Creation emulates. But before we do that, as it would have been great if I would have transitioned earlier, got to give a shout out to our newest patron subs, Fallen99 and Scribble. Thank you so much. They support us over at patreon.com/Dungeon Crawler Network. That's how they help us keep the metaphorical torches lit and our podcast rolling. That is incredibly awesome of them. So I appreciate that. You guys rock. We also had 2 new iTunes reviews this week from Eternal Pantheon and AJ2U365. Both 5-star reviews there. Eternal Pantheon goes, an absolutely wonderful show, and AJ says, amazing summary of Ashes of Creation news and engaging discussion of the game. I cannot wait to play. Thank you so much, guys. That really does help us out. Allows people to know that we are a real podcast, that we say real words, and sometimes it matters. All right, guys. Time to hop right on into the discussion topic. Combat systems. So to set this up a little bit, we know that Ashes of Creation is going to be a hybrid system. They're going to have both tab target type skills as well as action combat skills. So my question to you guys tonight, what other games can you give me an example of that had hybrid systems, or one system in particular that you hope gets added in? Because, I mean, we can break it down if we really want to and say, hey, this is a full action MMO or whatever, but this is what I enjoyed. Or this is full tab target, but this is what I enjoyed. Maybe we can mush that in together. And then on Friday, everyone can go how wrong we were. There we go. Who wants to start?
So I'll start with Guild Wars 2.
Okay.
I like the mix of the hybrid they did. It's a unique way of doing it when you're going to mix together the tab target, which counts the damage first, versus the action, which counts the damage after. And there's different variables in each one. So it depends how you mix those two together, and the way they did it works out. So it's going to depend how I see them mixing the different ways of doing it.
So when you're talking about mixing the different things together, like, I know when we talk about Guild Wars 2, my first thought of when we talked about Ashes of Creation was Guild Wars 2. When they talked about the hybrid style, that was what I had in my head. Because there are tab target type abilities. They use a soft lock for their ranged abilities, and they also have ground target. Are you seeing that more of the way Ashes will be going?
I would think so. It's a little tougher to figure out how you're going to do a ranged ability without doing a tab, but you still can. Because what you're going to do is, well, technically you're going to line it up, and you're going to have to make sure the damage zone gets hit by the damager. And that's going to have to depend. If somebody dodges, like with an ESO, they know that ahead of time, but within a hybrid situation, you may not. Depends how they set it up. It's going to be interesting.
Alpha Soul, what about you?
So for me, I guess the first question that I'd like to answer is what I look to play, or why I play these games, right?
Sure.
I play MMORPGs because I like the RPG aspect of it. Not necessarily like I love playing fighting games, but that's a separate genre to me. So the whole kind of BDO, non-tab target puts me on edge because it means that it brings another level of skill into play that doesn't have to do with numbers crunching or your builds or anything like that, but it more has to do with your actual physical play and ability and your ping, and all that kind of factors into it when I don't believe that it actually should. So for games that I like are more of the tab target games that take away more of the quick twitch type fighting and more that bring in your build and your planning and your strategy into it rather than quick twitch. So as a result, I actually did like the combat of Final Fantasy XIV, as well as Star Wars: The Old Republic, and to some extent World of Warcraft. I actually do like all three of those and the way that their combat feels and functions. I'd probably have to say all three of those have certain aspects that I really do like.
Sure. Now, I know I've been mostly playing ESO and WoW now. Thank you, Blake, for that. I begged him, dude, I'm thinking about buying Battle of Azeroth. Please tell me I can't do it. And he didn't talk me into it. He was an enabler, really. More than anything else, he enabled me in it. And he's like, no, it's going to be awesome. Here, So I've been playing that a lot recently. The one thing I do like, and I know some people hate WoW's combat. I don't know why. Because I'll tell you what, it is fluid, and that's one thing with tab target type games, where you can definitely feel that it is very important, the key responsiveness. Now, because I'll say I played older games that were slower on the uptake. EverQuest 1 comes to mind. I remember playing Project 99 a little while ago. And that is significantly slower, and I get it from the tab target. But I mean, when I started playing those, and then I went to WoW and realized how fast-paced WoW was, that amazed me. Like, at those days, I'm like, is this action combat? Because it was so much quicker. I mean, it's just responsive. Whereas some of the other tab target games definitely didn't feel as responsive, and I also think that's what kind of killed a lot of them. The one game I know, Alpha Soul, you and I had talked about in the past, that was tab target that we liked, but one of the things that I think killed it was Rift. Its tab target was not responsive at all. And you could feel that it was not responsive, and like it was a marked change going between the two games at the time, WoW and Rift. Because they kind of butted head and they shared a lot of the same audience back and forth. Because Rift's whole campaign, if you remember, do you remember their campaign? We're not in Azeroth anymore. So they were actively going up against WoW in a very, I mean, every game was, but they were outright just bashing their heads up against the Juggernaut and saying, hey, here we are. But when you got into the game, while a lot of the systems were very neat, and we'll talk about that in a second, the responsiveness was not there, and you felt that after a while. The one thing that Rift did have that you talked about, and one of the reasons why you like playing RPGs in the first place, is the building of a character, like the mixing and matching of different souls they had to essentially create your own talent trees. That was pretty neat. And I'm glad you brought in that perspective of playing an RPG. You're not as fond of the action side because, it definitely does feel Twitch-like. And I mean, while I like those games as well, there is a difference. I personally couldn't stand BDO's combat. Like, I did not like it at all. I thought it was terrible. If you had any kind of ping issues, and this is coming from a guy who has really fast, like, fiber internet, it was not an issue for me, but I knew quite a few of my guildies and whatnot ran into it. You couldn't do anything of note, and it really just felt like, from what I understand, it was fairly complex too. Like, there were actual combos you could do that, if you were really good at memorizing the way the combos were, kind of like the old fighting games you were talking about, Alpha Soul, you could bringing back the memories of playing Double Dragon and what was the other one? One of the original Street Fighters and stuff like that. Going over to my friends.
Killer Instinct. Man,
yep.
There was a whole bunch of them.
There were, but do you ever feel like the idea of, if you hadn't played, like my cousins, they would want to play, and I didn't have the games at home because at the time, my parents didn't like the fighting games, so they wouldn't let me have them. My cousins didn't matter, but I still like to play them. When I went over, though, they've had hours to play these, so they'd be essentially be able to lock my character down completely because I didn't know the combos, and they knew all the hold downs, and while I'm still laying on the ground, they're setting up their next combo. It was kind of crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But from the videos we saw, I really don't see how I know they said you'll be able to almost go completely action with it. I don't think you're going to get what BDO has. It's not set up that way. Thoughts?
Yeah, I hope they don't. I know what they said, that maybe you could. From what I've seen, you're right. I don't actually think they'll be able to do that. But more importantly, I hope that they won't go that route. It's not. I'm not poo-pooing on the style and saying that it's bad or anything like that. I honestly think that it's just of a different realm. You start to take more away from the RPG aspect once you go the BDO route and into the Eastern style, usually of quick twitch games, basically.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, even in ESO, right? There are some folks who won't even step into Cyrodiil, let alone IC, because you've got a different set of ways of working. It's faster, it's more paced. If it's not, action, but it's close, right? And you take a little bit away from some communities who don't want to go into that. So you're going to balance that. Are we okay with that? Like, personally, I like playing PUBG. I'm terrible at it, but I like playing it. I'm just not fast as my sons are, and I'll never be that fast. I don't have the hours and times to do that. That's one of the things I like about ESO is it's close to it.
I was going to make a comment about age, too. You've already...
Go ahead.
Your sons are younger than me, I think. So, yeah, no.
Yeah, they're 24 and 25.
Oh,
so it's
yeah, they are younger than me. All right.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting when this comes out, how they're going to balance it. That's why I'm very interested in how they set it up with, when you look at the action and you have the ability of actually moving out of the way, taking your damage zone out of the way of the damage error, to call it that, right? That can happen, and it's interesting how they're going to set it up with the animations. With the action, the animations occur pretty much during what's going on. If you look at the tab targeting, it occurs after it's already decided how's it going to end.
The old school tab target, I can see what you're saying. When you hit the button, it calculates the damage just at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I like the comment you made about ESO not being action, whereas I would have considered ESO action, to be honest. Because a lot of, even WoW, let's go to WoW right now. WoW is more action-based than others, because think of the ground targets, the AoEs that you have to get out. So many of the raid are mechanics where you're seeing patterns on the ground that you're dodging, and like you can actively dodge certain attacks. because they have essentially what are called ground target AoEs that as long as your character is not in the template when the damage is calculated, because there's a setup to it, which you don't see it on the back end, you see them swinging and here it's setting up the damage, but the damage isn't calculated for, you know, X amount of seconds. As long as you're out of that skill template area, you're not taking damage. So you can, quote unquote, dodge, but there are certain abilities that as long as you're within line of sight, you know, someone hits a key, you're getting hit, you know, so I guess you got that. But ESO, there are such thing as active dodging, you know, the double tap to dodge. Guild Wars 2 did the same thing, whereas it didn't really take away from the fact that a targeted ability was calculated at that point in time. So if someone hit a button and it's like, okay, gonna do 100 damage, let's factor in this mitigation. But what it did check was the status of your character first. If you were in the middle of a dodge roll, you were marked as invulnerable. So it would still calculate damage. It just said absorbed or dodged or whatever because you're invulnerable. So that calculation went in first. I guess the real question when we talk about action, I mean, Terra, for another instance, had a hotbar but was considered action. What made that any different than Guild Wars 2 or Black Desert?
It depends how you set it up. All right, that's really the way it comes down to is how you set it up in the code to begin with. And honestly, they need to set the code up in such a way that it's not easily to change if it's going to work. If they need to make a choice on how they're going to do this, because it all revolves, all that combat, all that calculation revolves in different spots. Right? For instance, when I'm working on the dungeon crawl I'm working on, that's going to be action. I'm working on a asteroids type one that's going to be tab targeted. So they work differently depending on how you're going to set them all up. It's interesting to me.
Yeah, no, I'm actually kind of curious what you see as different between the two or how you're calculating damage.
So interesting. Real quick.
Well, to take for instance, like in PUBG, right? If you can jump out of the way of something and say there's an AoE on the ground, right? You can jump up, you're above it, you're not going to be affected. That's why I see a bunch of people and I see jumping up and down in Cyrodiil. They think they're out of the AoE, but they're not because of the way the calculations work in ESO. If you're in that circle and you haven't dodged out of it, you're going to get damage, whether or not you're above it or touching the ground or not. If you're in PUBG or something similar to that type, that action, if you're above the zone, you're not going to get it. It's all how they set up the damage zones and how they set up the damagee or damager, right? And what it's going to do and how it's going to do it. And do they have it affect, like for instance in ESO, you have the ability to, a red dot shows up, right? You know ahead of time you can dodge that. You see that even on things that, you know, you can dodge. But if you have the rune cage as a Sorc, you can't dodge that. You even lift a finger at someone with a rune cage, you're caught. That's just the way. There's no way of dodging. There's no red circle to dodge.
So what makes? Well, actually, before I say that, Alpha, you had a comment.
Yeah. So I wanted to just really quickly read something that the Crowfall lead developer had posted in regards to the differences between the three kind of combat: mixed, classic, and action. So it's really quick. In WoW or classic classic tab targeting, when you press a button to deal damage, the client checks your range to the targeted enemy, and if in range, all requirements are met and damage is dealt, character animation is just a visual feedback or something that happens. It's not necessarily for it to actually hit. In Guild Wars 2 or mixed combat, most attacks don't calculate their damage instantaneously. Pressing a button starts an animation and will only deal damage if there is something in the area when the animation completes. Also, the damage is only calculated if a hit connects. Thus, movement is important because a player can leave the targeted area and thus won't be damaged. And in Terra or action combat, pressing a button will also start an animation which will deal damage if there is a mob in the target area. So it looks like As Storms was saying, it's a mixture of the three and how they actually set it up.
And well, even the action side of things, it makes me feel like instead of just doing an animation, the animation's not arbitrary. So when you're going in an action game and you're actually hitting the button to attack and your guy lunges forward, it's actually a multi-stage attack where first step, hey, is move forward, right? We'll just make it simple. Stage 2, determine if target is available at location that that your animation took you to. If no, miss. If yes, calculate damage.
Right. That's how damage zone in the damager works.
Right.
You have in Unity and Unreal, you have pretty what we call box colliders, right? Those colliders can be either the damage zone or the damager. And when you get a weapon, you've got that weapon in the hilt. You've got not in a box, but everything else in the damager box. And you've got your character, the other character, who's in a box collider or cylindrical collider, whatever you want to put them in. They have the damage zone. If the damage in the weapon crosses the zone that has the box collider you're in, you receive damage. You could also receive more damage depending where it hits in the box. So again, it depends how you want to set it up, and I'm doing 2 different ways because I want to see how 2 different days work together or separately.
Gotcha. I'm gonna go shut this door so that this cat toilet doesn't go nuts. But be right back.
All right, good choice.
Yeah.
That was a good article too. I read that article.
All right.
Alpha, that was a good one.
Yeah. It's got a lot of good information.
OP had a good one too on the difference.
I missed nothing, I hope. So going into actually ESO, let's talk about ESO a little bit. I feel like so much of this, like with Ashes, here's a fun one. Even when they refer to action combat versus tab target, I still feel like what they are going to do is something more akin to Guild Wars 2 than anything else, because there is a lot of tab target type abilities when it calculates. It looks like they're also using what I've always seen is a lot of template based ones where it's a ground target area where it's like, so when the animation happens, there's a delay, and then if you are standing within that animation area, the target damage area, you're going to get hit. I know they talked about an action camera, so you'll have the crosshairs, so you'll be able to aim more effectively, I guess, when you're dealing certain action. What do you guys think about that? How do you think that's going to fit into this?
Well, if that's going to work as a true way, then there may be putting different points of damage in different parts. So that you want to get a headshot, you're going to get more damage hitting a headshot than you are going to hitting a shoulder.
My only question is they're not set up. See, I really don't think they're set up to a point where, like you said, hitting a shoulder or a headshot would count, because I know they did that. Let's go into ranged abilities, archery and casting and stuff, because those tend to be the ones where you feel like you can get your targeted. The problem with the MMOs and the way they're set up is latency is factored in a lot. Like, what determines a headshot when some people your latency could vastly change depending on your proximity to the host, your internet connection, how many people are being rendered in such a place. That's why games that normally allow you to have that headshot type stuff are often limited in scope, right? They're closed in, the battlefields where it's a closed-in map. Only so many players can actually be available, so you're not actually calculating all that information that could possibly happen.
It adds a lot to it. It adds a lot to it.
Yeah.
When PUBG went to a 100-character map, they actually did it during PAX. They did the rollout without even doing a beta. They said, well, let's just run this map, right? So they first didn't work very well, but after a little bit, they did some changes to it, and that allowed 100 people to start doing that type of action combat. There's so much they have to take a factor in, because you have all these different pieces running when you're doing action combat. But you're right, with MMOs, with the latency in there, they have to account for a lot more. They can't do a lot of action. It's depending on how it's going to work.
Right. Right. So like even with ESO's idea of the tab target, or not their tab target, but the targeting reticule, if you will, that allows you to determine whether or not you're going to hit certain things. Do you foresee that as actually mattering in Ashes? Like, I still, in my head, I cannot wrap my head around what they're going to do in terms of a full action set versus a tab target set.
It's going to depend. If you look at, like, say, bow, right? If you've seen the, as a Nightblade, you shoot off a poison or a snipe shot, and the enemy goes actually around the corner a little bit. Up to a certain point, the arrow will turn and follow the enemy. Up to a certain point. Beyond that, it's not going to bend that much, but it's got like a magic bullet effect, right, when you've tabbed it. So I hope they don't do that. To me, that's a bit, then why do we have colliders in the way of like walls and such? But it depends how they're going to do it.
Well, I mean, we know they're going to have colliders because they do have collision in effect for even character side of things. So someone could, in theory, step in front of.
Well, wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, it would be.
Oh, yeah. Really? So you guys are saying that somebody could step in front of an arrow that's fired, and you could friendly fire your buddies in the back?
Can you do friendly fire? I don't know.
I highly doubt they're going to do that from that perspective, but the idea of player collision does exist, but it's a matter of whether or not it's full player collision, or I think they talked about having something more akin to a selective player collision, right? So friendly targets you'll be able to walk through, unfriendly not so much.
Well, think about that. You could hide behind enemies, right? If you're getting shot at, you just get in front of, or behind one of the other ones, and they're going to get hit. So, right. But then again, if they're going to do selective collisions, it could go through them and hit you anyways.
And see, so
it's interesting.
Well, with ESO, if you have your crosshair on somebody and someone runs in front of them, you're hitting that person instead. I've done that multiple times where I'm trying to target somebody with like my ballista bow ability, and someone else runs in front. It's like, oh, crap, because then it's targeting them.
Yeah,
like that has happened to me multiple times when I'm trying to drop that, because that is. You have to be targeting the person when you activate the ability, because then whoever you're targeting, that's where it's going to actually aim and hit.
And that's where the tab helps.
Yeah. But as for Alpha Souls, think about how even with ESO's done, like enemy players and NPCs you can't walk through, but player characters you can, because they didn't want to create that trolling effect where people can block a bank access. So if you're not in combat with them, collision does affect them when you enter a duel, because then they enter that enemy state, but not before.
Yeah. Do you remember back in UO, when they did have, you collided with anyone, and if you wanted to move past somebody, it would cost you a bit of stamina.
Yep.
There were some of those places that you could not get through. It would take you, 10 minutes to get out of like a main bank if there were a ton of people there, because you had to waste all your stamina, wait for it to regen, and just kind of shove your way through the crowd.
Yep, I remember that. Yep. One of the very first times I had logged in, I was doing a bunch of bank work, so I'm going in there just, sorting my bank stuff around. I was there for a little while, not realizing it was right around prime time, so I hopped in the bank. No one's there. I'm doing my own thing. Turn around, the bank is packed. And I'm like, well, guess I'm not getting out of here tonight. Yeah, no, I do remember that. That was interesting. So, yeah, in terms of like player collision though, with when you're targeting, I'm not seeing any friendly collision being added. But yeah, my prediction is that from the action side of stuff, what we're determining as action, I would almost determine as more ESO related, which some people may say is action or not.
Now, see, if you look at the player collision, which is interesting, Earthfall, which just came out on a beta access or whatever it was, they have player collision, even friendly player collision. I started playing this with my other son, and I shot him in the back, right? Because I'm like, oh, I'll just shoot by. Well, I shot him, right? So with that one, you have to be careful of your surroundings and who's in front of you. So I don't see them doing that, but that is an interesting way to do it. I haven't seen a game do that in a while, so that was quite interesting to have that happen.
So here's a. Oh, was that? I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
No, my son didn't think so. That's okay.
He didn't find it as funny. Yeah.
He didn't find it funny.
Oh, that's a shame. So I was just sitting here thinking about this, and from what we've seen from Ashes, from the combat perspective, let's talk about that for a minute, because we've seen the paper dolls, and all the stats for defensive stuff, dodge, parry, block, are all statistical, not action-based. Like in ESO, yeah, there is some number crunching with the amount of damage mitigated, but you actually have to actively block for it to say, hey, yeah, I'm actively blocking. Their paper dolls show block, dodge, and parry chances as a percentage. So where's the action coming into it if all the defensive stuff is still going to be based off a percentage? Is it just, oh, when I hit, essentially becomes a who can out DPS the other first, because there's no actual defensive capabilities. That's all handled on the passive side. Because
I'd hope that's not the case, but I'm wondering how that would work.
I'm trying to pull up one of the paper dolls now. I mean, obviously it's subject to change, but the fact it was already there and shown, I'm trying to pull it up. Character sheets. Because I know I've seen a few images of the... Oh, actually, here's one right now. Willpower. Let's see. This was taken from the Ashes of Creation wiki. Power, dexterity, constitution, willpower, wisdom, mentality. What is that? Physical. I have to get closer to my screen because I'm old. I really can't see that. I just can't read what it is. But the very bottom one is block percentage. So here, I'm actually gonna link this to you guys in chat so you can see it as well. That way it's not just me doing whatever it is that I'm doing here. Oh, come on now. Actually open the page. I hate the way Google does images now because it's such a pain in the butt. Here we go. Is this a user interface? I'm gonna just link this to you guys in our chat discussion. So if you scroll down through the images, you have the Alpha Zero gear and equipment slots in the UI, but you'll see that there is a block percentage. Now, I was wrong about parry. I feel like that first one is physical, magical. Oh, physical attack, magical attack. Okay. So that actually kind of reminds me of something more like BDO, because remember they had attack points and defense points. Now, this is just, I guess, whether or not you're more physically based or magic based, but the fact block is still a percentage. So I don't know if they're going to have an active block at all.
Or, I mean, you got a good point there. You could... Man, I don't know.
And I think that's the thing that sets ESO apart, that I don't look at ESO as more of a the action side. I look at more action than I do tab target because there is the active block. Now, parry is still... Well, parry is block, but without a shield. But it doesn't really have that real... it's passive, so therefore I would say it's more akin to what's known as tab target. So that kind of concerns me when I see that, 'cause it makes me think that even the action side of stuff is just going to be who can DPS the other person down first through their physical, because there's no active block to it. So even if there's action in terms of I'm ground targeting everything. The other thing I wanted to make note of is the idea, and I think a lot of people look at the idea of action bar versus no action bar. And people, I think, tend to confuse the one as being action combat and the one being tab target. When you have a hotkey, a list of all your attacks on it, it's all of a sudden tab target, right? But we've seen, like in ESO's perspective, you can hit most abilities, and some of them will either automatically hit and others won't. I'm actually trying to pull up the other one. One of the very first games I seem to remember, Terra they actually had a hot bar, but it's not quite the same. I think they changed a lot of it too. And honestly, I didn't play much Terra. It was way too Asian for me. Turned me off after about 10 minutes of actual play. So do you guys feel like hot bars actually add to or take away from the action side of things? Or is it just a cosmetic in your head instead of hitting, you know, WWSDE in a certain order in order to do attack or hitting 1? Does that actually matter?
To me, it doesn't.
I don't like the I think you're talking about like the BDO style.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like the you have to hit it in order to make a combo to perform a certain move.
Yep.
I actually like the action bar concept. In fact, I hate games that, or hate's a strong word. I dislike games that have a very limited set of options that you can do with action.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, yeah. Let's go move into this little last half of the show here. The very last part. I shouldn't say half, but let's give a little bit of speculation on the upcoming newer combat reveal coming up later this week when the show comes out. I'm curious to see what you guys feel like Ashes is going to bring. And I'm curious to see how right or wrong we are, which we could talk about in a later episode. So, Alpha Soul, why don't we go with you first? Obviously, we've seen their version of Tab Target, right?
Yeah.
They have a hot bar, so we know a hot bar exists. But, you know, that doesn't necessarily mean that the UI doesn't change. What do you think they're actually going to bring from a... Let's put it this way. Let's discuss it in this. They said you can either be Tab Target setup, hybrid setup, or full action setup. What does that actually mean to you?
I'm honestly picturing something like ESO, to be honest. When they say that, that's the only system to me that really lends to a blend that I'm thinking. Maybe Guild Wars 2 type of a system, but that's kind of what I'm picturing. Because at the end of the day, I don't think that I know that's what they said, but I don't think that you can actually mix them. I think, as Storms was saying early on, you know, there's kind of a way you design it and you pick it, and you can't have multiple players all running by different rules, if you will, for that set. Otherwise, one has an advantage over the other, right? So I tend to think it's going to be like ESO.
Okay. Storms, what about you?
Yeah, I think that while they're going to give you some customization on your side, I don't think they're going to modify it that much. I think it's going to lean toward the Guild 2 ESO way of looking at it and working that way. But again, it's hard to tell based on what we've seen so far, so I'm very interested in what's going to come out and what they've said.
Sure. Yeah, I'm kind of with everyone here. In my eyes, and I'm gonna kind of take the more darker approach, or I don't want to say devil's advocate. I'd probably say devil at this point. Quite frankly, my idea is the tab target. Certain skills will be tab target based. I really don't think anything is going to change at all. Like even the action camera that is available in Guild Wars 2 really doesn't change anything except for your perspective as a player, which I guess can be helpful. But that's just a camera angle, essentially, in my eyes. It didn't really add anything else. You weren't any less actiony or more so by having the action camera. You know, your skills didn't actually change. So my idea is their version of action combat is not going to be like BDO. It's not going to be when you go full action set, your UI changes, and now you don't have a hot bar. You can, you know, WASD or left click, right click, mouse. That's not going to happen because remember, so much of the integral systems, like the auto attack being on Q, which by the way they desperately have to move. That's just awful and it shouldn't be set up that way in the first place. I know even if you can rechange keybinds, a lot of players don't change keybinds. a lot of new players don't change keybinds, and if they see that and how unwieldy where Q is compared to your movement keys to hit your auto attack, that's going to be awful. So that just needs to move. But that's, you know, I'm going to re-keybind that regardless, but that should probably just be rethought of where that's actually placed. But I'm seeing ground target abilities and what we would see as template type style abilities, like akin to Wildstar. I could see their action combat being like Wildstar. When you're hitting a button, essentially a telegraph appears, and anything within this field is now going to be, you know, damaged, right? Honestly, that's about as action as you're probably going to get is Wildstar's level of combat, which is everything's just kind of these ground target emotes that you're just throwing down on the ground. And anything within that, even if other players can't see it, which is probably a good thing, as long as you line up that little front triangle in front of you or rectangle in front of you, anything within that's going to get hit. That's how I'm going to see their action combat as being. So it's definitely going to be skill-based. I don't think it's going to change the UI around, because I cannot imagine playing with, let's just even say Arcage, because a lot of people who play BDO played Arcage. One player having Arcage's skills, another player having their entire UI changed to be BDO. It just, I can't see how that's going to work and be calculated together, because those are two completely different systems, and the amount of code that would go into actually coding that would just be insane. I can't imagine it working. So I really do feel like it's just going to be, you pick a skill. This skill is a tab target skill, meaning that you just highlight a player. Even if it's action camera, which really isn't going to be any different, other than the fact that when you move your mouse, your camera moves with you rather than being more isometric, which, whatever, helps you might see somebody, and has essentially, even the action camera really just simulates a mouse click. You know, when you're put the reticle over somebody, it's the same as if you were in isometric and you clicked on them. Just, you have to be facing them at that point. But you still have to be facing even if you're in isometric view, because otherwise it'd be like no line of sight. That's still being calculated on the back end. So some abilities will be, you pick a target, however you do it, either through the action camera view. I say action camera view because that's all it is, or isometric and you click on the target and hit it. Ground targeted and template based, whereas you hit a button, it'll say anything within this zone of influence in front of you, around you, whatever is going to get hit. And as long as you maintain that shape on the target, they're going to get hit. All right, guys. That comes to the end of the show. I think it's a little bit shorter of a show than normal, but my cats are fighting underneath me. I don't know if anyone heard that, but they started growling at each other. So, all right, Alpha Soul, where can people find you?
Yeah, I can be found within the Dungeon Crawler Network on Discord, and obviously within the Hands of Fate channel. I can also be found at my YouTube channel, YouTube/DRACDOC.
Excellent. Storms.
So you can find me in the Dungeon Crawler Network Discord. Not as much as Aggelos, but that's okay. I try. You can find me at Digital Piper Studios. We have now released our first game on iOS, so Zoop Hop is out on iOS finally. We also are released the same game, Zoop Hop, on Android. You can find me in the Android store. And we're working on other games. Like I said, we're working on a Dungeon Crawler, which is going to take a longer time. And like an Asteroids type game for Xbox and Windows and PlayStation 4 and the Switch. Hopefully this year, we'll see.
That would be a fun conversation to have, just period, like the development side for consoles.
Oh, absolutely.
I knew once upon a time it used to be a lot more difficult to actually write. Now, I know they changed the architecture around, especially with the newer gen consoles that made essentially development for PC very similar to console. I just don't know if the Switch actually jumps in on that, but
yep. That's why I need to work on the what is the one? The 3DS first, And once I get into that, then you get a game to Nintendo and say, hey, this is our proof. This is what we want to do. And they set you up, and you got to get a Switch development hardware, and you're good to go.
Oh, well, cool. You can, of course, follow me on Twitter at Aggelos, AGGELOS_DCN. And, of course, on the Discord channels, both the official Ashes of Creation Discord and, of course, our own DCN community, which you'll find in the link below. Yeah, that's it. And, of course, if you're interested in joining us for Ashes of Creation, check out our guild Hands of Fate. We cover a wide range of gaming preferences from PC to console and have developed a community that ranges from the super casual to the cutting edge of hardcore players. And we strive to create an environment where we can support all of those play styles and enjoy each other's company at the same time. Of course, we are a PVX guild based in the North American Data Center when the game comes out, but we have players from all over the world. We have scheduled events for each region's prime time. So if you're an EU or Oceanic resident but have enjoyed playing with us in the past, we encourage you to join us. Our guild's focus is on progression rating, small-scale PvE, crafting, gathering, node-based PvP, aka open world, and community growth. You can also check out everything we do, dungeoncrawlernetwork.com. There you can find links to all of our social media, including Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/dungeoncrawlernetwork if you want to help support the show. You can also leave us a 5-star review on iTunes so people know that we are a real podcast, that we say real words, and sometimes it matters. Thank you for joining us on this episode of From the Ashes, and we'll see you next time. See you later, everybody.